Some things in life are so corrupt, so evil, they make a decent man wonder why God ever saw fit to let certain individuals come into the world. It was the summer of 1893, just west of Ghost Ranch, New Mexico. The sun hung low in the sky, the heat bore down on them like a bad spell, and dust adhered to every surface it landed on. Even the lizards remained out of sight. Nothing else moved except one man, Thomas Graves. Thomas was not a troublemaker. He was simply going home after exchanging salt blocks and bullets in town. A man who did not say much but never forgot. But on that day, his life changed in ways he could have never imagined. As his horse trailed along a canyon path, Thomas saw something odd beneath a single juniper tree. It had the appearance of nothing more than a torn bundle of fabric. But when he rode closer, his heart stopped. It wasn't fabric. It was skin, pale, bruised, exposed. There, on the hard earth, was a girl. She had to be no older than 20, perhaps even younger. Her thin body seemed to be stretched to breaking point. Scratches covered her legs. Her lips were split and bleeding from thirst, and her hair stuck to her face in dark, matted clumps. But her eyes were worse than all the injuries. They were empty. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She didn't even ask for help. Instead, in a voice so dry and cracked it barely sounded human, she whispered, "I'm filthy. Inside and out." Thomas didn't need her to explain. The bruises, the torn blanket, the silence in her gaze. They already told a story too cruel for words. He knew death. He knew war. And he knew what men do when there are no eyes to see them. But he had never known a soul broken so badly it no longer feared anything. For an instant, he simply stood there, unsure whether to turn and walk away or step closer. And then, without saying a word, Thomas took off his coat, draped it over her shoulders, and swept her up into his arms like she was a feather. Not because he was being heroic. Not because he was being sentimental. But because there was nothing else a man could do. The girl did not struggle. She did not resist. She merely leaned her head onto his chest, as if she had finally been given leave to cease running. And beneath that tree, under the blistering sun, a man who had already lost all he could ever lose encountered a woman who had even less. He didn't know her name. He didn't know her past. But he made himself a silent vow. Whatever hell she was running from, she wasn't going back alone. The ride home was far, hard, and intolerably silent. She leaned against him on the horse, shaking occasionally, as if her body still wasn't convinced safety was possible. The ranch itself was a solitary cabin tucked behind parched hills.
No neighbors. No inquiries.
Just broken fencing, dusty panes, and silence. The kind of place where the world could forget you were alive. Inside, Thomas placed her on a ratty cot, arranged a clean dress that had been his dead wife's, and carried in a basin of hot water. Then he went back outside and sat on the porch, leaving her alone. The sun fell low. Coyotes howled in the distance. Thomas lit a cigarette and waited, wondering if by dawn she would disappear. But she didn't. By dawn, he discovered her in the barn, sitting in silence, holding a sack of feed like it was the world's last soft object. She devoured the food that he presented her with, beans and cornbread. Slowly, warily, like a person who had learned meals didn't happen for free. Later in the day, she finally broke her silence. Just one question. "Why didn't you touch me?" Thomas gazed at her for an extended, heavy period before responding. "Because no one should have." Her lips quivered. She didn't weep, but for the first time her armor cracked. That night, she didn't sleep in the barn. Instead, she huddled under a blanket by the fire. And although Thomas didn't push her, something changed in that silence. She wasn't safe. Not yet. But for the first time, she wasn't alone. Neither of them was aware yet. But someone else had already found out she was still alive. And they were on their way. Some are so crooked, so ugly, they would make even a good man wonder why God allows some to breathe. It was summer, 1893, just beyond Ghost Ranch, New Mexico. The sky weighed heavily down upon them. The heat suffocated the earth, and even the lizards remained hidden. There was nothing that moved except one man, Thomas Graves. A taciturn rancher, dependable, the type that didn't say much but recalled all. Coming back from town, he noticed something strange beneath a juniper tree. It appeared to be a clump of rags at first. But when he approached, he came to a standstill. It wasn't fabric. It was flesh, white, bruised, battered. A young woman, about 20, perhaps younger. Her body hung by threads. Her lips parched from thirst. Her hair matted and tangled with blood. But what struck Thomas wasn't the bruises. It was her eyes, empty, hollow, as if fear itself had already left her. When she finally spoke, her voice was nothing but dry gravel. "I'm filthy. Inside and out." Thomas didn't require the facts. The tale was etched on her skin. And for a hesitant moment he simply stood there, balancing the quiet. He had witnessed war. He had witnessed killing. But never had he witnessed such a soul shattered that it had no power remaining to beg. Without comment, he threw his coat on, picked her up, and walked off. Not because he wished to be heroic, because it was the only decent thing left to do. At his ranch, he left her alone. A cot, water, clean clothes that had been his late wife's. He didn't ask her questions, didn't prod her, but something in his silence started to mean more than words. The first thing she requested was a comb. The second thing she requested was more difficult. "Why didn't you touch me?" His answer was easy. Because no one should have. That evening, she did not sleep in the barn. She remained by the fire, and she was no longer alone. But peace never lasts out here. Days after, in town, Thomas encountered the man who said he owned her. A drunk with a wicked smile and a threat. "My brother governs this county. You have just made enemies you cannot combat." Thomas responded with a punch so fierce the man's boots flew off the porch. And in a voice low enough to freeze the air, he added, "She ain't yours." That was their doom. By dark, Thomas and the girl Ida had vanished, taking the cabin with them. Because some men don't forgive. Some men hunt. The bush became their cover and their test. Warning signs of pursuit emerged. Fresh footprints, too deliberate to be travelers. Thomas knew they were being hunted. And then the war started. Silent ambushes. Gunfire in the darkness. One enemy trapped in a snare. Another waiting in the dark. Thomas fought like a man who had no more to lose. And when the battle had finally died, only he was left standing. Blood on his arm. Smoke in his lungs. Ida gazed at him, shaking. "You kill for me?" she breathed. He shook his head. "I live for you first." Weeks went by. They constructed a cabin on the high plateau where the wind was pure and the nights were silent. There, something new grew. Not fear, not pain, but peace. One evening, as the firelight flickered, Ida said, "That girl under the tree, she's gone." Thomas looked at her long, then nodded. "Then I'm proud to have buried her, and to know the woman sitting here now. No grand declarations.
No dramatic gestures.
Just a man and a woman, scarred but alive, finding a reason to keep breathing. And that's the reality. Not every story concludes with victory. Some conclude in survival, and sometimes that's sufficient. So now I'll pose a question to you. If it were you who discovered her beneath that tree, what would you have done? Would you have walked away, or stepped forward, though no one may have seen but God?